Every life tells a story. Join Frank Julian as he shares his one chapter at a time from Story of a Soul 2, releasing every Wednesday.
The Story of a Soul 2 by Frank Julian with Sean O'Neill, narrated by Frank Julian. Chapter 24, The Birth of Fawn. There was a lot of people praying for us and wishing us well. Many things would be coming together as though they were converging, even my being stuck with a used needle that frightening morning in August 1987, when the patient had the profile of an AIDS patient. I always wondered whether I would get AIDS from that. Thank God I did not. The smiling contest, my nursing career, my health focus, and of course my spirituality would collide in Africa. God always had a plan for my life. I would often get impatient and mess things up, but not this time. We arrived in Cape Town to a very warm welcome. I spoke at the church. We were asked if we wanted to go to Robben Island, where Nelson Mandela had been in prison for 2 decades. We said, of course. When we arrived on the island, we learned that the former prisoners had become tour guides of the prison, which had been transformed into a museum. They were able to tell us stories in a first-hand way, and it was extremely moving. I was touched to my core. They informed us that the white prisoner got 100% of the standard food ration, the colored 80%, and the blacks got 60%. Do not mess with a man's food ration because of the color of his skin. We stood in Mandela's cell as we listened. We went out to the yard, and we were told that Mandela would have to dig a man-sized hole, get into it, and he'd be buried up to his neck. The guards would then urinate in his face. He was an inspiration to me, and I was humbled by the thought that he somehow came out of that living hell without a hardened, bitter heart. As we left the island, I boarded the ferry and went to the back of the boat so I could be alone. As we were returning home, I began to weep before the Lord. I was horrified by the hatred that was on that island and that still plagued so much of Africa and the rest of the world, and I asked if there was some way I could bring about healing among the races. Deep in my spirit, I heard, if you will love the motherland, it will bring healing at home. I thought that this message was strange. I never thought in those terms and did not know what it meant. I kept it in my heart and would ponder the meaning of it periodically. I have begun to see the meaning of it now, all these years later, with the creation of Fawn, fighting AIDS with nutrition. I didn't set out to love the motherland of Africa. It happened to me. I'm very humbled to watch all of this unfold. It is my destiny. God had a plan for good to spring from me, and at this time it began to unfold. The next day we flew to Botswana. We landed at Gaborone. It was mid-March, and it had just rained. We landed on the tarmac. There were no gates. We walked down the stairs in the middle of paradise. Everything was green. The air was clean, the sun was shining, and there was a palpable presence of peace. I had no idea what I was walking into. We were greeted by the hosting pastor's wife. The pastor was also a professor at the University of Botswana. We learned later that he was traveling the country doing AIDS education. We would be staying at the house of Mrs. Karoba, the country's Minister of Education. His daughter-in-law was part of the church, and they had agreed to host the Americans. As we drove in the van to the house, we drove through the city in the capital of Botswana. We saw the American flag flying at the American embassy. That's when it dawned on me that this was a capital city. The country's population is relatively small. This was the country's center. We passed by a graveyard, and there were rows of new graves. I found that strange. I thought, there hasn't been any civil unrest or war. Then I said, this must be from the AIDS epidemic. I was right, unfortunately. When we arrived at the house, we settled in and then met Mrs. Karoba. It turned out that she was a registered nurse and was working for a hospice caring for the AIDS patients. I was informed that the sister of the pastor's wife had died that week of AIDS at only 38 years of age. I was deeply saddened. I asked, what can I do to help? This question was one that had changed my life. I was told to send Ensure. I thought, Ensure? I would later find out that the scientifically created meal in a can helps to build T cells in the immune system that have been attacked by the immunodeficiency virus that leads to AIDS. I responded by saying, I can do that. I can knock on doors. I never knew that I'd still be collecting cans of liquid nutrition and be doing AIDS education nearly 20 years later. The room lit up when I answered the question. Everyone in the room saw the light. It was a metaphysical, spiritual light. We decided to take a picture of the moment. We went into the living room and got ourselves arranged for the photo. Mrs. Kroba wanted their president in the picture. They took a picture off the wall, and she stood it up on her lap. The picture that was taken on that day recorded a moment that still baffles me. But we have the photo, and when I look at it, I ponder it carefully. It could have been me if that needle stick had caused me to get HIV and develop AIDS. I wanted to help in whatever way I could. I have never seen the hand of God, but I was about to see the effect of it moving. His fingerprints would be all over my life. When I got home, I went to the post office with a case of Ensure and planned to mail it to Botswana. The postal worker looked at me sympathetically and said, "This is something you ship, not mail." I left there not knowing what to do. I'd never shipped anything before. All of a sudden, in one of those surreal moments, a thought came to me. I look back now and feel that it was a heavenly message. The thought was, go to the reporter who wrote the Smile Contest story and see if she'll put a little something in the paper. Maybe others would want to ship some with me. Instead of putting a little paragraph in the middle of the newspaper, she put it on the front page. I'm still collecting and shipping nutrition to the sick of the world. It reminds me of the story in the Bible about the 5 loaves and 2 fishes. It just keeps on multiplying. Many other strange occurrences began to happen to me. I was a visiting nurse, and while I was examining a patient, his or her child would go in the bedroom and come out with a generous check to help me ship the Ensure to Africa. This occurred repeatedly. Something was happening inside of me. I would get into the car and I would prepare to drive to the next patient. I would have a CD playing. I didn't plan this, so I took note. Diana Ross was singing to me the song, "There's a Place in the Sun Where There's Hope for Everyone." I began to weep uncontrollably, not just a regular cry, but a deep wail. I would cry and pray and weep aloud, "God, help me to help them," over and over again. I would have to wipe my eyes as I arrived at the next house. Then back in the car, I would play the song repeatedly with the heartfelt prayer for them. I would love to tell Diana Ross how many lives she has touched by singing me that song. I believe that prayer of intercession is the foundation of Fawn.
Thank you for listening. Join Frank Julian every Wednesday for a new chapter of Story of a Soul 2. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter.